Okay, good morning, everybody. If you have seen the poster about Dr. Coombe's speech today, you know that I'm not Dr. Guolibo. I'm Christine Goh, and I'm a professor in the English Language and Literature Academic Department. It is my pleasure today to welcome our speaker, Dr. Christine Coombe, who is here on a 2 weeks visit to NIE. I think those of you who attended her first session will know who she is, but allow me to also introduce her again. Dr. Christine Coombe is an associate professor of general studies at the Dubai Men's College, Higher Colleges of Technology in the UAE. Personally, I am aware of Dr. Christine Coombe's work because I have come across many of her writings and publications. In fact, she has published over 60 volumes of work in different areas, including assessment, teacher effectiveness, leadership, and task-based teaching. So the topic for Dr. Coombe's talk today is assessing learning in online and digital contexts and environments, and opportunities and challenges. So what Dr. Coombe is going to talk to us today is about how we're going to embrace the new normal of assessing teaching and learning, and at the same time to be very mindful of how to do it fairly, validly, and also reliably. So I'm going to pass the time over to Dr. Christine Coombe now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goh. Before I begin on the topic today, which I hope will be of interest to all, I'd like to thank NIE for being my host institution during my very brief sabbatical. For many of you who know or do not know, the topic of my research for the past couple of years is to look at the classroom of tomorrow and to look at teaching, learning, assessment, and teacher education initiatives that will move us forward. So this presentation focuses primarily on assessing learning, okay, in both a digital or an online format. And it did offer many opportunities for us and continues to offer opportunities, but there have been some challenges as well. Okay, I see we have a comment that's come up. Am I standing in the right place to be seen on the Zoom? Okay, perfect. And again, if there are any burning questions that come in over the Zoom, feel free to interrupt me or anybody in the room who wants to ask a question. I'm going to ask you to reflect back on COVID times a little bit, because I think COVID played a very important role in getting a lot of the world online in terms of teaching, learning, and assessment. So let's get started, okay? So my agenda today is basically looking at how we got to where we are today. And we're going to look at, very briefly, technology before COVID. And we're going to look at the good, the bad, and the really bad, the ugly, okay? We'll look at some current challenges that are in place with regard to online assessments or computer-based testing. Then we'll look at some opportunities afforded to us. And we're going to look specifically to recommendations on how to move forward. Okay, a lot to do, so let's get started. So where are we basically? Well, I think with COVID, for many places around the world, I don't know about Singapore, COVID kind of precipitated a rapid move to online teaching and what we call work from home. Same with you? COVID hit, did you all go to online teaching and from home, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Steep learning curve was experienced for many people around the world. And I still remember the days of, and I work at the higher colleges of technology, so we were doing online stuff before COVID. Our students were fairly good at this, but I still remember sitting in my office at home, and in my office, I wish I'd put a picture here. I have a wall in front of my desk where I sit at my computer and I look at diplomas. I put everything on the wall, my diplomas, my awards, my book covers. It's full of stuff. It's a very motivational wall. I look at it and I think, you can do anything, look what you've already done. But I still remember the first 2 or 3 days of teaching online. And I thought I didn't know how to do the most basic things like click on something and circle it on the screen. One of my students figured out that I was trying to circle something on the screen and sent me a private message saying, with screenshots on how to do it. And I thought, wow, this, here, like 35 years in the classroom, president of TESOL, okay? And my student is teaching me how to do stuff. So that really sparked my interest. And I think every day for the rest of the year while we were at home, I embarked upon a journey to acquaint myself with how to do things online. So if I look back on the advantages of the pandemic for me as a person, it would be that I really got myself to a point where I've developed a new skill set. So I don't feel my skills are I'm not as good a teacher online as I am in the classroom, according to my opinion, but students tell me they like my way of teaching online. And I think, oh, those poor students, what must, like if I seem good, what are other teachers doing? So at any rate, there was a steep learning curve for everybody. How about you all? Do you experience a steep learning curve? Lots to figure out what to do and little time to do it in? Admit it. No? Okay, so once we digitized the curriculum, then assessment had to follow, okay? With this came issues with the cornerstones of good assessment, like reliability, validity, practicality, washback, transparency, authenticity, and security. You know those terms in assessment? Like validity? Who knows what validity is? Would you like to tell me, or are you just wanting to listen today?
I think they'd rather listen.
Okay, validity is basically, are we testing what we're supposed to test? Reliability means, are we testing in a consistent way? Practicality means, is the assessment teacher friendly? Do we have enough time and resources to make it successful? What's the next one? Washback. Washback is one that many teachers don't know. Do any of you know what washback is? Don't worry, I won't ask you to define it. Just tell me if you think you know. Washback is the effect that a test has on teaching and learning. Transparency is the availability of ready information about how a student will be assessed and the criterion upon which that assessment will be utilized. Authenticity is, if you use communicative language teaching, one of the goals of CLT is to teach in a communicative way. That means we teach our students to function in the real world using real world techniques. So just as that is predominant in the way we teach, it should also be enhanced in the way we assess. And finally, security. We have to think about security, don't we? I don't know about you, but every day, I'm based in Dubai. Every day there's a new story about a scam that's going on, basically. So we have to be careful, and test security is of critical importance. Now, the opportunities of moving online became apparent once we kind of got the hang of things, but so too did the challenges. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So maybe you've heard of Clint Eastwood's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a very famous Western movie. If you haven't, maybe you can find it on Netflix. But I have put together this presentation on what is good in terms of online assessment, bad, and really bad, or what I'm terming here ugly. Okay, so now just because online assessment really came forward during the pandemic, it has been around for a long time, okay? Computers have made a major impact in education for the past 30 years in terms of testing. The impact of technology has been minimal, unfortunately. Although ETS and Cambridge ESOL have adopted computer-based testing like the TOEFL, IBT, etc., limited number of educational institutions had adopted this because of infrastructure concerns. Few individual teachers use CBT. Paper-based tests still dominated, and I'm gonna say they probably still dominate today as well. How about you? Do you use paper-based tests if an assessment is important? Do you use paper tests? When you take a test, is it on paper?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right. Now, this was due to the recognized benefits and pitfalls of computer-based testing. So let's have a look at them. Now, let's have a look at the good, the positive elements. Well, in terms of valid and reliable tests, computer-based tests are more reliable. In fact, item and statistical analyses can help test writers identify questions that are good and questions that are weak. Now, if you'll look at all these, I'm going to go through a number of research findings. And the research findings are not from last year. I've chosen the first research findings in that area because I want you to understand that these findings have been in existence for a long time, not just the last couple of years. That's why the citations here are fairly old. Test path data can also be used. Test path data is when we study how students answer questions, the order upon which they answer questions. Do they backtrack? Do they skip a question they don't know and go on and go back to it? They do in paper-based tests, and which answers they change based for whatever reason. So that's some of the good things. As far as increased content validity, more content can be assessed through computer-based tests. The reliability of the marking is also increased because there's no teacher element. Most of the time, computer-based tests are objective questions like MCQ, like close, like true false, things like that, matching. So the computer marks it all, so there's no real human error or human judgment involved. Takers can receive their results quickly, sometimes instantaneously, if we program the test that way. And there's also seen to be a reduction in test fatigue when students do a computer-based test, okay? And less test anxiety as well, which is an important thing. Now, in terms of test administration, there are also some good elements. We've got more standardized test administration because the computer is doing it, not the invigilator or the proctor. We've got more flexible test administration schedules. Automated marking means that teachers don't have to organize themselves to do things. Large number of tests can be accurately and quickly rated. Test takers receive their results instantaneously. CATs result in shorter tests. What's a CAT? Anybody know? What's a CAT in testing? We've got CBT and CAT. CBT stands for computer-based tests. And a computer-based test is a test. It's kind of like taking a written test and putting it on the computer. Questions are all the same for everybody, okay? Sometimes the test takers receive the questions in a different order, okay? But it's the same test for everyone, okay? A CAT is a computer adaptive test, and a CAT is said to be very reliable and can be shorter. What happens in a CAT? Well, you start taking the test and you answer a few questions correctly. Computer says, maybe the student is capable of a higher level of question. So it switches you to a higher tier of question to try to accurately gauge your abilities. To answer those questions correctly, what does the computer do? Take you up again. But then you have some missed questions. So the computer says to itself, the student is not ready for this level. Let's go back to this previous level and confirm. So the computer gives you questions based on your degree of correctness on previous levels, okay? It's a very difficult type of, even for testing boards, it's a very difficult type of testing to do because lots of, groundwork has to be put in. Another good thing about computer-based tests or online assessment is an increase in test security and the ability to use an item bank. An item bank is where, let's say you're going to get a 50-item quiz in grammar, okay? You create 3,000 tests in grammar and the computer chooses at random 50. So those 3,000 questions are the item bank. Okay, let's see. Feedback, tagging items as well with feedback. So if you've got the resources, you can write a question and then you can write like a feedback loop that says the answer to this question is A because blah, blah, blah. And then C is not the answer because blah, blah, blah. So you give feedback as to what this is very difficult and very time consuming to do, right? All right, let's look at the negatives with these kinds of tests. Well, construct irrelevance variance. This is where you have to use another skill in order to answer a question, okay? So construct irrelevance variance is like in a listening test. An example of that is raise your hand if you were born in the month of July. Any other July babies here? So how am I answering the question? I'm listening to raise your hand if you were born in the month of July. I'm using a physical response. So if I said, write down which month you were born in, what other skill are you required to have access to? I'm asking you a question, you're listening, and then if you're writing it, you're complicating it with writing. So there's lots of different types of testing that we have construct irrelevance variance for. What is it for online assessment? Well, the ability to type, to use a mouse, to use a scroll bar, kind of computer skills as well. Reading is also problematic because reading is very different. Reading from a paper, from a book, or from paper versus reading on a screen. So we need research on those kinds of things. We also need to think about the equivalence between, is an exam taken on computer the same as one taken on paper? So we also have inabilities of the test taker to review the test, to highlight words or phrases in a text like they would do if they were using paper, to see all of the text and all of the questions, to answer selectively, to backtrack. Backtrack means leave one question, go further forward, and then come back and revisit it. To eliminate distractors and to change answers. All of these factors contribute to less than reliable and valid tests online. Higher order knowledge also cannot be tested. When you're doing objective types of questions, you're only using, which are the ones amenable for online computer-based tests. You're not really doing productive things like, languages communication. Let's see, bad attitude. Often there are some people, interestingly enough, some students who think CBTs are too easy, but others think they're too difficult. So you've got lots of different elements, okay? Let's see, okay. So the test administration issues are test security is what many testers think is the major issue. I don't know if how familiar you are with the testing landscape of the past, but ETS, the famous example is with educational testing services way back in the early 2000s when they were launching the TOEFL IBT. And they had to withdraw this test in many places in China. China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea, after it was discovered students were writing the answers to all the questions, especially the essay, and putting them on language websites. Okay, so there was major test leaks. Students would memorize, I think there were 160 some live essay prompts, And students wrote essays to all of them and released them online. So it was one of those things where a computer-based source was the link. So it went back. So a country where it would have been great to launch an internet-based test, it was paper-based test because there was so many cheating allegations, test leaks. All right, test administration, insufficient access to computers. During the pandemic, I'm seeing here that many of you have a computer with you. How is access to computers here? Do most students have a computer or a tablet? I know you all have phones, right? I see them right next to you, right? So you have fairly good access to computers? Okay. I live in Dubai where, you know, Dubai's, what do you think of when you think of Dubai? Do you think rich or poor people? Think rich people. And it's true, right? But when you think of the family size, when all the kids were at home going to school, we had issues. Because let's say there was 7 kids in the family, right? We're all going to school at the same time, having to use a computer. So we had issues with accessibility and with the power of the internet as well for like, plus finding a place. I had some of my students, you know, connecting from their garages because there weren't enough empty rooms, empty quiet rooms in the house for access. Something I never thought would happen. Let's see. In terms of creating CBTs, they're very expensive because you have to have lots of different items. They need to also be replaced regularly as some of the items become public domain or live. So you've got to be continually refreshing them. Technology can fail too. Have you ever had an issue with technology where you couldn't get online, you couldn't access something? No, I always say technology is our best friend when it works, right? However, unfortunately, technology can fail us, so it's not really always our friend. Also, when you're doing a computer-based test, you also have to have a paper-based version of the test ready in case somebody's computer fails, right? So you're kind of doubling your work. And you need to make sure there is an equivalence between the paper-based version as well as the CBT. Okay? So negative elements, test takers may engage in misguided test taking or what we call gaining strategies, using their test taking knowledge to answer a question correctly that they don't know the answer to. And most of the time, I just reviewed a test today, early morning, and most of the items had an item violation in them. Using only, you know, only as a response option, only do this. What happens when you see only as a test taker? To think not the answer, because it only takes one exception to make only incorrect. So oftentimes I answered every question correctly just by looking for items that had words like only or always or never, extreme words. Words, if I didn't know the answer, I chose the longest option. I was correct. So we have to, as teachers, be able to write questions that don't give our students unnecessary clues to the correct answer, okay? That's the topic of another couple days of a workshop, though. We need to ensure that assessments are valid and reliable. This is so important. These are some current challenges we face. We need to accept and be able to recognize academic dishonesty and cheating, okay? We need to design assessments or assessment test tasks that minimize, mitigate, or hopefully eliminate these cheating strategies, okay? And we need to reduce strategies to reduce cheating. So let's talk about cheating. Can we do that? Okay. This is what happened in my institution. We're the higher colleges of technology, okay? We've been using computer-based final exams for as long as I can remember, because our students all have laptops, our faculty all have laptops, and we were, you know, I had hoped that I killed my last tree. okay, many years ago, because we're all paperless. What happened during the pandemic is that cheating exploded, okay? So we have all these rules. Students have to go through the, like that thing at the airport, the security thing to scan them for whatever it's called, medals. Students cannot bring, well, of course, not a phone, their car keys, not even a water bottle into the thing, into the exam hall. And finally, last semester, we had about 1,100 and some cheating incidents across our system of 19 colleges. This past semester, only 15, because we moved back to paper-based tests. And it hurts me when I think about it, because in this day and age with technology, we need to be moving in that direction. But because for some reason, cheating has become so widespread, at least in our own context and in many contexts around the world. Can we talk about Singapore? What's cheating? Are there lots of cheating incidences or what?
Exams are still paper-based.
They are.
In this institution, yes.
Okay. What are they worth in terms of the percentage?
It's not-
And are they a must pass? Okay, so they must pass the final in order to get credit for the rest of the assessment. Okay, so they're high stakes, no matter what they are, right? What percentage? Okay, so they're still paper-based. Do you have any assessment that's computer-based?
Not an exam,
Yes, and
maybe personally or. Yes, so lots of things happen on the computer, but they're not, usually not high stakes in the sense that you're just.
okay, interesting. Okay, well, whether cheating is a problem for you, I don't know, because nobody seems to want to say it is. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how, if it is a problem, how you can reduce it or minimize it, okay? So as you know, cheating is not new, okay? I always goof around with my students and I say, you cannot cheat in my class because I'm American. We invented cheating, okay? Way before you were even born. But still, I'm still thinking, how could you cheat with a car key? Okay, why are car keys banned? Other than, write little sticky notes on your car key, but then could you read it? I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud there. So cheating is not new. Okay, the first instances of cheating date back to a Chinese civil service exam taken thousands of years ago that carried, if caught, the death penalty. Okay. Now, we've been also doing standards for citation and referencing. This began at the end of the 19th century, okay? So APA referencing, I don't know when that came out, but APA, MLA, whatever, that's been around as well. At the same time, scholars began researching issues that were related to cheating with some early research dating back to the late 19th century and early 20th century. So cheating has been identified in the US as a widespread problem in college campuses, okay? So even when exams were proctored or invigilated face-to-face, there was cheating, okay? Students could hack into the online testing program, okay? They could communicate with one another during the exam. They could access the internet or use external devices. They could access documents or apps that could help them. They could get someone else that was off campus to come into to take control of their computer and take the exam for them. And they could pay essay mills or companies to do assignments for them. I wish I had added another bullet point there, which is more recent. Could ask ChatGPT to help them answer the questions, okay? So my colleague, Peter Davidson at Zayed University asks, if students cheated when we were watching them in an exam hall, imagine what they are doing at home. Have you ever imagined that? No. We had exams at home for about 6 months, I think, about half a year. And we had a lockdown browser. You know what that is, right? A lockdown browser. And our lockdown browser for students at home was where they're sitting, their computer's in front of them. The computer takes a picture of them and then scans the environment to make sure there's nobody in the room with them, and then records their exams. If they do anything dodgy, it flags on the recording. So teachers, instead of invigilate, we all thought, oh, this is so great, we won't have to invigilate. We had to watch videos of flagged exams. It was funny sometimes, but it was really not a good use of time, okay, to watch a student video. And I thought, you know, maybe it worked, but there were some ways that probably the students were able to, you know, like have somebody lay on the floor and, you know, they've added an audio thing, so you can get sound bites as well. So somebody can't be laying on the floor giving them answers at any rate. Now, what are the ideas with regard to cheating? Well, lots of people think it's easier to cheat on an online test than it is on a face-to-face one. 74% in a 2009 study. The beliefs are that online universities don't really care about cheating. It's impossible for online instructors to identify cheating. Plagiarism checkers are easily fooled. Online students are more likely to cheat, and since online students cheat, it isn't that big of a deal. So those are some of the commonly held beliefs, which many people think are myths surrounding online education. All of these myths have been debunked empirically. And 40% of college students have admitted to engaging in online e-cheating, I guess is what it's called in the literature. So if you look at the 5 top ways that students cheat on online exams or e-cheat, cheating by proxy, using external resources and aids, getting external help while taking the test, foreknowledge of the test questions, and technical manipulation. Cheating by proxy is where somebody else is involved in the taking of the test. A ringer, having a ringer. So the rest of this presentation is going to focus on ways that you can mitigate academic dishonesty or cheating through the assessment task types that you use, through the topics that you ask students to be assessed on, through online proctoring programs, through the technology we use, and through strategies that can be utilized before, during, and after the test. Okay, so the use of a multiple measures assessment scheme is so important. If you take home nothing from this presentation, take home the number one recommendation I feel for effective assessment is the use of multiple measures. Multiple measures assessment is the idea that we need more than one piece of data we need more than one assessment to get, you know, different types of data from our students on their ability. So you can't just use multiple choice tests and give students a grade at the end of the semester. You need some traditional types of assessment like MCQs, like the objective type questions, but you also need some alternative assessment, like projects, like performance-based assessment, like presentations, those kinds of things. Are your assessment systems multiple measures? Good. One of my fears with regard to multiple measures is that now people they're saying no more computer-based tests because of cheating. We will go from having a multiple measures assessment scheme to one where we don't, where we're based solely on things that students can't cheat on or use ChatGPT. So that's one of my personal fears. So what types of test tasks require multiple drafts? Anything requiring multiple drafts is good, because if students create the first draft of something in the class, they are locked into that draft. Okay, so things like essays, projects, reports, assessments, or assignments that require collecting data or doing primary research, presentation portfolios, or assignments done in groups or pairs are all recommended. However, the new You know, the new demon is Chat GPT. So you also have to think of ways where students aren't gonna like copy and paste your assignment into Chat GPT and, you know, get a ready-made thing. All right, another thing that you can do is use the topics that you use. If you personalize and localize the topics, it's less likelihood that students will get outside help. Okay, I'll tell you one that I did. Okay, one of the ones I did was the last one. I teach research methods. And in that class, students have to come up with a topic, a research question, and then they do some background research, and then they formulate their own survey. They collect responses, analyze them, and create a poster, and then do an oral defense on the poster. So mine was the third bullet point. Let's see. Research project where students have to create, administer, analyze a survey on an aspect of COVID-19 that has had an impact on them. And this is pretty good because one of the advantages of doing anything on COVID is that COVID is fairly recent. So there's not a lot of stuff out there on the net for them to copy and paste. So that was a very successful one. But rotating the topics from semester to semester is also a good idea. And doing something that's of local interest. Online proctoring programs. Do you use an online proctoring program? Here are some of the ones that you can use. We use Respondus Lockdown Browser Monitor. That's the online proctoring program for Lockdown Browser. So any of those you can have a look at. So with the technology we use, browsers that we are using for online assessment should ensure that ports are disabled for external services. Internet browsing is blocked, unauthorized software is blocked, navigation controls restricted, access to keyboard shortcuts like copy and paste are denied, and things like screen capture, screen recording, screen mirroring, and screen sharing are disabled, and printing is disabled. So these are some things. Now, despite all of this, my institution uses this. We suspect that some Chat GPT is getting through. We don't know how, but soon we will, and that'll be, but then students will have discovered another way to beat the system. So that's hence going back to a paper-based. Okay, so let's turn now to before, during, and after the exam strategies, okay? I think one of the things that's really important is to raise students' awareness of what academic honesty and academic integrity is, okay? Teachers in my part of the world, because the Arab culture is one that focuses on helping each other. So a lot of people say that Arab students don't really know helping, the difference between helping or cheating. I personally think they do, but that's a good cultural excuse to utilize. But because I know that, do you ever have students working in group? I'm assuming you're all teachers, is that correct? Are you all teachers? Okay, you got students working in groups. Does this ever happen to you? Okay, let's say you're the group, okay? And we've got you typing busily, right? Okay, everybody else is like, okay, you have computers, but you're looking at your phone. She's doing all the work. This is a common occurrence in my classroom. One student busily working, and then three other students, lazy students, and I'm only using you because you're here. I know you're not lazy, but you're sitting there and pretending to help, but you're like fooling around on your phone, okay? Does this ever happen in Singapore? Can admit it, we have lazy students everywhere. I have a very good impression of students in Singapore, okay? But, we have a lot of this where one person does all the work and the only work the others do is put their name on the front page of the paper, and they don't even bother to standardize the font most of the time. So we've got lots of that kind of behavior. And then the student, I was one of those students where when I was younger, everybody wanted to be in my group. Do you know why? Because I was, and still am, touch wood, a high achiever. Sorry if that sounds like I'm bragging, but it's true, okay? It's not bragging if it's true, right? Everybody wanted to be on my team because they knew if they didn't do their part, I didn't want my grade to go down, so I would do my part and their part. We've all been through those kinds of things. I can tell you've been through because you're here today on your vacation. I can tell. So we have to make sure that people know what is academic integrity, right? And we need to fly the flag that students who cheat are only cheating themselves. Okay, I try to do that. I say, you don't need to cheat. You're all very clever. Use the time that you would, have to figure out how to cheat on the exam to actually study for it, and you'll do better. Let's see, do you all have honor codes? Do you know what an honor code is? Document that you read detailing all this. These are the examples of cheating, and you know that they are not permissible at the institution. You tick and you sign, and it's on record. We used to have that on every exam paper. Now we have it at the beginning of a testing season. So students do the honor code, have penalties that deter students from test taking. We often have teachers who say, I know my students have cheated on that, but what happens is if I bring a case of cheating up to the administration, they will do all these investigations. I will have to write 3 or 4 reports, and then nothing happens to the student. So I only create work for myself if I take something forward, okay? So oftentimes, you have to decide as a teacher if you're going to be the one that moves cases like this forward, okay? Now, one other thing you can do in the test is make it difficult for students. Design and administer multiple versions of a test. Do paper-based tests, right? So, paper-based test, even if it's not multiple versions, you can have the cover page can say version A, version B, version C. And then when you pass the test out, you make a big deal of, okay, this row version A, and then this row version B, and then this row version C. So the students think they have a different test. Now, some are clever. They're going to want to ensure they have a different test. So they might look at the first question. So the first page might be different questions, but in a different order. Okay, so this is one way that you can, make students think it doesn't matter if I try to cheat because it's a different version anyway. You can change the sequencing of the test by randomizing the questions and the response options. You can employ multiple versions. You can restrict the test window. You can tell students about these practices beforehand that, please study because you will not have the same exam as the person sitting next to you, basically. Having a pool of test items for all assessments is always a good idea. Setting accurate timings for all assessments. How do we do this? How do we set an accurate timing for our test? Our test has 40 MCQs. How long should we give students? An MCQ takes between 45 seconds to 1 minute to take. So you give students that amount of timing. You might build in 5 more minutes for them to review, and that's your test. Oftentimes, people write a test and they say, oh, this ought to be okay. And what happens is at the end of the test, sometimes students finish 15 minutes early. If they finish early, what do? Finish 15 minutes early. You're sitting there. You can't leave. Start fooling around, okay? Or if it's an online test, maybe you go back into the test and you find answers to questions in other parts of the test. So your goal as a teacher who develops a test is to develop a test that is timed correctly so that students have time to do the questions, quick review, submit. Okay? Students, if you have too many questions for the amount of time allocated, and students are going to submit, or there's an auto submit on their online test, they're going to panic. They're gonna, start getting nervous or anxious and things like that. So timing is a crucial element. Okay, let's move to during a test. AI proctors like monitor, record the students, their screen, their audio, and their environment to pick up on flagged behaviors or inappropriate behaviors. We use a program now that offers sound bites. So randomly during the test, we can hear if there's any noise going on or anybody reading the questions. Allow for only one question at a time. This is, I'm not sure of the reason for this, but I think it's for screen availability. Prohibit backtracking. Teachers, we always hate this because we want to tell our students, if you don't know the answer to a question, move on. And then at the end, you can go back and see the question. This is backtracking. But for many important exams, computer-based tests do not allow for backtracking for some reason or another. For subjective assessments, have students type their answers directly into the course management system portal. In our case, that's Blackboard Learn, and handwrite their responses. If they handwrite, photograph them, and then upload them if you use that kind of thing. What do you do for writing assessment here? Do students produce a draft? Is it handwritten? Is it typed? They type it, okay? Every time I read that and I think, okay, maybe I should put a chat GPT thing is there as well, because now that's coming into question that students copy and paste a chat GPT response. Okay, we're almost done. After the exam, delay score availability until flagged recordings can be looked into. Check students' predicted scores with their achieved scores and use plagiarism checkers like Turnitin, Safe Assign. Do you use one of those here? Do you use Turnitin? Do you have the Turnitin that offers the AI feature? You do?
You can see it.
Teacher can see it. How is it in terms of accuracy? Ours is Safe Assign. We use Safe Assign, and we use Safe Assign because a lot of our cheating is within the institution. Okay, a student from Dubai hands in the project that their cousin from Abu Dhabi did 3 years before. So that database, we have a big institutional database in Safe Assign, which we wouldn't necessarily have in Turnitin. How does the Turnitin checker? How is that?
Very reliable. Like for original function, right? When it matches you with the papers and whatnot.
Right, okay. Okay,
Trust it fully.
yes, hopefully we'll have something that comes up where we'll be able to detect AI written stuff. Plagiarism checking online. Here is some, what you guys have turned it in, so you don't have to worry, but here are some free ones on this slide. And here we are, the final slide, recommendations for moving forward. I think it's important to say that we can't continue with the same tests and the same questions moving forward. We have to evolve from that part. We need to use multiple measures, even though we know we are inviting cheating through AI generated work in this way. We need to take it full advantage of the benefits that computer-based or online assessments can offer us, but we need to mitigate any of the pitfalls that we've mentioned here this morning. To do this, researchers need to investigate a number of areas to better inform ourselves about online assessment. And it is only through this research that key opportunities can be gleaned about what this era affords us. Now, the last two slides, I'm going to stop here. The last two slides, I've given some ideas for things that we need to research. If you're students that are looking for maybe a research topic, maybe these would be of interest to you. If you would like my PowerPoint, you just need to email me or Dr. Lebo. I've already sent this PowerPoint to Lebo, and he can also send you this as well, okay?